I spent hundreds and thousands learning from an art teacher.
I look like a potato. Give me a second. Like another video of 1 hour footage that I need to edit, and another video where it's about sewing pants that I need to finish. Yet I still decided to be an art teacher today and make another video to edit. 2 art tips that I'm going to share with you. These are the tips that I've learned ever since I was around intermediate, which is 10, 11 years old. And like, it wasn't something that like, oh, I learned and then straight away I was able to do. I'm like 19 now. These 2 tips, disclaimer, it takes a lot of time and practice and like refining it until you can master it. These are the tips that I use for drawing everything, and I specialize in drawing portraits and people more, and these are the 2 holy grail tips that I use to draw them all. But you can practically use this to draw anything you want. Another thing is, none of my art teachers in school ever taught this. Like, I'm someone who's done art like ever since like kindergarten, and I've always done the subject art like throughout my schooling years, and none of the school art teachers or from anywhere ever taught these drawing tips. And I'm like,
what?
Now you might be wondering, like, where did I learn these 2 art tips? Around when I was like 9 to like 13-ish, just end of primary to just before start of high school, I was getting art lessons from this low-key famous artist, I think, in New Zealand. He literally had TV show features, getting interviewed for his art, because he published his own art book. He also had his own art gallery feature somewhere in Auckland City, I think, and I got to have like lessons with him because he was also teaching lessons. So I learned quite a lot of things from him, which accelerated my art skills and it became like a good foundation for everything. But I won't be mentioning who this artist is because
She went to jail.
I was like really young that time, so I was kind of confused.
Like, all of a sudden, my art teacher is in jail? Maybe I'm teaching illegal art advice.
But it wasn't anything art related, but that's just the thing. I will now transfer the skills that I learned from this artist that is now behind.
I don't even know if he's out of jail or not.
I'll be featuring these artists here. I'll be using their artworks as examples and critiquing their art and applying the 2 tips that I'll be teaching you guys. Before I get into the tips, if you watch the video all the way to the end, there'll be a little surprise 24-hour giveaway kind of thing, and I'll include one last 3rd tip, which will be kind of contradictory and ironic to the 2 tips I'm going to share.
Now, the 2 tips that I use
For drawing everything that can help you map out and accurately draw anything you like that no one's ever talked about are angles and measuring and comparing proportions. Now you might be like, angles, like
What? Measuring proportions? Comparing proportions?
what the hell are you talking about?
give me a second. These are the things that most artists will miss out on. I guarantee you, like, I see a lot of artworks from artists that are like legit, like really good at rendering and doing art, but once they do a photo study or like a realistic photo study with when they have their reference photo and the artwork, some artists that don't apply or know these tips and tricks, the major flaws would be the angles and proportions. Now you might be like, obviously, like proportions. To harness these proportions, you need to be comparing and contrasting all the proportions with angles. Angles is a major aspect that people don't nail down and usually hinders them from accurately drawing realistically. Angles is always what gets people off. And what I mean by angles, always measuring the angles. Like, I usually grab my pencil or pen and just like put it against the paper, like, and then I kind of slowly transfer it. You could have a picture like this where the face is angled like this, and then to get the angle of the eye line and the middle of the face are 2 important angles I always map out in every portrait I do. And it's always grabbing the pencil and just seeing the line of like, oh, there, and then transferring it onto paper and just always comparing it. I don't mean by like literally getting...
Is it a compass or a protractor? Whatever it is, that measuring tool, I don't use that. It's not necessary to do that. I mean, if you want, but like, kind of fuck that.
But your pencil and like your arm and holding it still is enough to compare and roughly get the angles right. I'll explain this later in my examples when I apply these tips. The next one, proportions. Measuring and comparing proportions. Now with measuring proportions,
I don't mean by grabbing a ruler and accurately finding out that, oh my god, the chin is 1 inch or like it's 6 centimeters or something like that.
I mean by grabbing your pencil and just, when you're wanting to find out the distance, grab it, just kind of make a mark on your pencil that, oh, that is the distance. Once you have this measurement, you compare it to other features on the face. And usually I kind of move it around to whatever I want to compare it to until I find something else that's the same distance as the chin. For this, it's the same distance around the top of my eyebrow to the bottom of my eye. So it's a matter of trying to find other proportions in the drawing that match up. So when you're accurately mapping out the face, you'll know that, oh, the distance between the bottom of my eye and the top of my eyebrow needs to be the same as the bottom of my lip and the bottom of the chin. You can do this for anything in the drawing. It could literally be this photo right here, and you're trying to get the height of the table, grab the pencil, and then just like comparing it to like, oh, it's the same thing as the top of my lip to the bottom of my chin. So you'll be able to compare and contrast the two proportions so everything looks as accurate as possible. So I'm going to use exemplar artworks, critiquing and applying these two crucial, important tips. First of all, I'd like to say thank you to this person for sending in their artwork and putting it in the spotlight for me to critique and use for this video. I'll be using the 2 tips to critique their art and show how just applying them can help improve the drawing massively. Now, first of all, I am comparing an angle which she has actually mastered and got the correct angle for. But if I were to compare the other wall side, you can see that the angle of that wall is slightly off. It is just an easy fix-up during the sketching phase, but another thing that could contribute to just simple sketching mistakes is the point of where the 2 walls meet up and the end of the staircase. And just to mention one final angle, it would be the rooftop. You can see that her angle is slanted in the opposite direction, and just by simply using your pencil to line it up against the angle of the reference photo and compare it to your sketching, it is an easy fix-up. But here I am mapping out all the simple shapes that I typically see when I'm tackling a drawing myself. And yes, I do realize I am sketching over the photo itself. This is to show my thinking process while I am looking at the image. Here I am attempting to sketch it out, and first off you can see that I got the angle of that rooftop wrong as soon as I measured it. Now in the sketch you can see I'm making these major black lines just to mark out the proportion of where certain aspects meet and end. For the little roof that I like to point out, to find out where the end of that roof met, I marked out the halfway point of the first level on the other house, which is how I found out that measurement. Honestly, throughout the sketching, it is a lot of comparing and seeing where certain aspects meet up in comparison to other features in the drawing. I don't know if that makes sense, but that is how my mind works when I'm sketching it out. Obviously, this sketch is not perfect. It was a quick rough sketch that I did in order to show my thinking process. Moving on to drawing faces. The only major difference in terms of angles would be the center line and the eye line. Usually those would be on an arc. Sometimes it would be just a straight line if it's just a front-on portrait. But for this image in particular, you can see that the angle is a curved line because technically faces are round. Now these lines don't have to be 100% accurate as soon as you map them out, but they are 2 crucial points that make the drawing look accurate. And that is something that you can fix as you draw. Now first off, I am marking the angle of the hairline to where it ends, and you can see that curved hair waving down. And when you compare it to her drawing, you can see that hers is slightly slanted more to the left and less straight than the original reference photo. Also, I would like to point out that when you get one angle wrong in the drawing, usually it causes somewhat of a ripple effect, I'd say, for the rest of the drawing to have all their other angles slightly slanted and off. The person drawing will actually not notice this if they don't actually measure it, because they will be attempting to draw everything to proportion but at a slightly different angle. Now for proportions. You can see that the distance of the top of the eyebrow and the bottom of the eyeglass frame is the same distance of the bottom of the nose and the bottom of the chin. Now, if I were to do this comparison on her drawing, it is still actually quite fairly accurate. It is just a slightly smidgen off, but I would like to point out that the distance of her eyebrow to the eye is actually a bit too far away from each other compared to the reference photo. And if I were to actually measure and compare it, you can see that it is the same distance of the lips roughly. And when you take that proportion onto her drawing, you can see that the distance between her eyebrow and the top of the eye is just slightly bigger than the lips that she has drawn according to the proportions in her drawing. And one final angle that I'll just mention that she could measure is the angle of the sleeves. The angle is more steep in the reference photo compared to her drawing. But at this point, it's me being picky about making everything absolutely accurate. I'm sorry for like flaming your art. I low-key feel bad for critiquing, but these are just the things that I see when I'm drawing pictures. Now, here I am attempting to do a quick sketch. I'm actually not that proud of this sketch. I was just kind of like roughly mapping everything out, applying all the skills. But you can kind of see my drawing and thinking process as I'm making all the lines and comparisons and shifting it onto the sketch on my side. Now, with the sizing of my sketching, I do realize that I have scaled my sketch slightly bigger because regardless of how big your sketch is compared to the reference photo, just by using the angles and proportion tips, you can actually still accurately map out everything in your sketch. Now, my sketching is not perfect. I'm not saying it is like 100% better because there's still a lot of things that I can fix. Let me know down below if this is helpful and if you would like me to make a separate video doing a completely voiceover of just my sketching and thinking process.
I'm in bed as I was editing that video. Do I want to put on makeup?
I wanted to point out the third tip that I promised that I would teach you guys. I can't be bothered to get up, so I'm just gonna share it with you in bed. But the third and somewhat slightly contradictory tip that I'm going to share that has actually helped me specifically for drawing faces. I don't know, maybe you could use this tip for drawing other things, but for me specifically to accelerate my drawing skills for drawing people's faces in particular is tracing. Oh, it sounds weird. Like, why would you trace when you're trying to freehand sketch? Now, for tracing, there's a difference between someone's art skills with someone who can actually render properly and someone who can't render properly. You can still trace an image, but if you can't properly render, tracing won't do much help unless you're actually, I guess, doing it as practice. There was a period of time where I spent like a year or so, even up until now, with some artworks where I'll trace the artwork first before sketching or just trace the artwork. Now, with tracing photos, you can tackle this one of two ways. With me, I spent probably a year or so. Sometimes I still do it to this day with some reference photos that I trace first to get the hang of how big the proportions are, because with the whole proportions tip, it is actually quite hard to like actually master like really quickly unless you do like an intense drawing session. But to help with me myself mapping out proportions, I traced over a whole bunch of photos of people's faces so that I could actually train my brain to be like, okay, there is actually a certain distance between like the chin or like the cheeks, because in my old drawings I felt like I never had enough room for the chin. But as I started adopting this tracing technique, that when I traced the face, I got my brain to get used to the fact that
There needs to be enough space for the chin, and I need to get my proportions right.
Ooh, gummy bears.
if you want me to go more in depth about the whole tracing tip, comment down below and let me know. But anyways, time for the mini surprise 24-hour giveaway.
I am going to... I hope I don't regret this.
But I really wanted to do this to thank you guys in particular for watching my videos, and specifically for people who have followed me for a long time and have followed me on Instagram and transferred over to my YouTube. I will be sending everyone who does the following things a digital phone wallpaper of any artwork they would like of mine. But this is only open if you do it within the 24-hour limit from the time of this upload. So I would like you to comment down below just anything about the video, what you found helpful, what would you like me to talk more about and make videos on, and include your Instagram handle. Make sure you're subscribed to my YouTube channel and following me on my Instagram. And I would like you to get your phone or maybe screenshot this. Wait, hold up. Take a photo with me right now, like screenshot. screenshot or take a photo of you of the video and do a story share to your Instagram, and remember to tag me so that I could see it. Usually for these phone backgrounds, later on in my shop update, I will be including them as products in my shop, so you guys are essentially getting one for free as a thank you for your support of my content online.
But thank you for watching.
I hope I made sense. This was my first time attempting to verbalize and teach what goes on inside my brain while I'm drawing, and I hope it helped you guys, and I appreciate your support, guys. Right now my art shop is in renovation. Depending on what my YouTube description says, my art shop may or may not be linked down below. But anyways, if you are able to support me, I would really appreciate it if you could support me on Ko-fi so that I can continue
Sharing free tips that I spent hundreds and thousands learning from an art teacher that's in jail.